Welcome to my budget deck channel, where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, might as well leave a subscribe. Today I had another look at Magistus because I had really much fun with the deck originally with my Duel variant of it, and I wanted to see how much you can actually do with a more pure variant that focuses more on the Magistus plays than just end on like Duel Winda and stall a bit. And well, since they don't have that many monsters, I felt like a pure variant would actually just end in either having to splash tons of hand trap into the deck, which you mainly want to do anyway, but not in a budget deck channel anyways. But I decided to go with a bit of a different variant, and this is I splashed in Generators. Sounds weird at first, but I'll go over why this is maybe not as terrible of an idea as it seems. First of all, you can get an extra negate, which is great because that is what Yu-Gi-Oh is all about, and having like 1 to 3 disruptions every turn, actually quite a strong thing. Plus, this card is actually a spellcaster, so you can actually use it to fusion summon into your Magistus card, which is quite nice because usually generators are mainly bricks in your hand, unless you play like a pure generator deck, which you'll run then cards that can compensate for this somehow. But in a splashed version, you usually don't. So these cards are usually dead in hand. But first of all, you could use it to fusion summon. Also, what you could do with this card is, since you have a small engine to search the Endymion Magistus, you can tuck the card back into your deck, which is very good if you run a deck that runs stuff like generators or even things like Double or Nothing. You can actually tuck them back into your deck and get another draw for it. You don't plus off of it, but you actually get to put bricks back to the deck where they belong, so it's not too bad. And also, this card doesn't have to pop a Magistus spell trap card. It can pop spell card. It can pop any face-up spell card you control, which if you run out of the generator cards, then you can still pop boss stage and it's not completely dead. Whether in other scenarios, boss stage would probably be completely dead once you have cycled through all of your generators. And another thing that will not come up much, but is technically possible, and that is you run Nina Ruru, which is a card that can actually, with its effect, add one level 4 or higher spellcaster monster in your graveyard back to your hand. So you could add Har back to your hand and then tug it back into the deck with Endymion the Magistus, which never happened to me, but in theory it is possible, which is a different kind of fun. But yeah, so technically you could keep your generator boss stage cycle going for another turn if you really want to, but usually you can go into other cards without much effort, and they have bit of a better effect, or do actually more than doing this elaborate scheme to get one card back into your deck. So starting off, one Ash Blossom, most people have it, so I don't really count it as an ultra rare. And with stuff like Maxi being around, and in general, hand traps are just good. You can say what you want, but they just sadly are what they are. So you will have to run as many as you have, and since most people will have this card at least at 1, I would put it in at 1. Obviously, you don't have to. You can play any kind of cards that you like instead. Triple Crowley the Magistus, which is... it's a good card, and especially in a variant that runs stuff like Utopia Double, which I feel like you have to run in this deck because it's so easy to go into rank 4s, and sometimes you will have problems with high attack point monsters that are somewhat untargetable or unaffected by your card effects, which with the new release of the Cyber Darks can be a bit of a problem. So being able to have another form of access for rank 4 plays and running your whole Utopia Double combo, this card is quite important. So I like running it at 3, even though it is very easily searchable. The Tuner is definitely a card you would be running at 3. Basically, you want to run all the Magistus at 3 because they're so little and they all have quite a high impact on the deck. So I like having loads of them in the deck. This one is your easy level 8 synchro kind of access. Also, it is rank 4 access, which is pretty nice. Other than that, it's good for the whole search. Equip one of your monsters from the extra deck, which is also surprisingly very good against Buster Lock. This deck doesn't struggle with the Buster Lock itself at all because you have so many cards that can equip cards from your extra deck to your monster, and then Nina Ruru is spell trap removal, so you can actually get rid of the Buster Lock and your opponent gets nothing out of this one, so this can be quite nice. Problem is skill drain, and that is the reason why I at least want to run one Magistus 3G, because this card can actually get rid of stuff like skill drain without having to use your monster effect. Problem is you can't search it without being able to use monster effect, so in the end, how much does it matter running at a 1? Not that much, but yeah, in other scenarios it's also helpful, so I did want to include the card as well. Triple Liliona, because, well, first of all, this is a waifu, so I can definitely run it at 3. No, this card is in general just a very good card. Can search any of your spell traps, your fusion spell, which is quite important for putting up one of your disruptions, and it technically can recycle your cards that are banished back to the graveyard, which is sometimes helpful because you can re-equip stuff with them then, but this is like a very grindy effect almost every time you want to actually be searching one of your spell cards, because they aren't terrible either. The biggest card in the deck, I would say, is the Endymion one, because it can get back bricks into your deck, which is very, very nice. Can also equip stuff from your extra deck. Doesn't facilitate a rank 4 play though. It can only get you to your Crowley, and then you have to have another spellcaster in your hand, which can be quite problematic because you run about like 16, I think, is the ratio, so it is a bit problematic in theory. So each of the, you see, each of the Magistus have ups and downs. Each of them achieve something, but none of them achieve the full combo, so you need random kind of stuff with it. The good card about this, the good thing about this card is it's a water monster, and Crowley can actually change its attribute, so you could go, if you want to invest the 2 ultra rares, you could go into Bahamut Shark to go into Totally Awesome if that is something you'd be interested in. I felt like it didn't do that much more than any of the other plays did for me to include the 2 ultra rares in the budget deck profile, so I didn't, but that's obviously an option you could be running. I like to run one Kaiju just because of the fact that there are monsters that are basically unaffected by a lot of card effects, which the Adignister, the Cyber Dark Fusion, so being able to at least have one Kaiju is good. The thing is, if you run it at 1, it usually doesn't really matter, but I like the option if you're in some kind of crooked cook grind game and stuff, then you could maybe draw into it. I like it being able to have one at 1. I originally tried it out with Pot of Prosperity, but Pot of Prosperity kind of clashes with the effect of the Endymion card, and I found that the put stuff back into the deck and draw 1 card of the Endymion is actually more beneficial to the deck than Pot of Prosperity was. Plus, Pot of Prosperity is another super rare, so I decided not to include the card. You could run it if you like. Ratios aren't set in stone. Same for the Generaider ratios. You technically could just run the double har. You don't have to run at Garda. You also technically could cut 1 har and just run at 1 at Garda and 1 har. I like that technically if you draw one of them and you can't tug them back for some reason, then you still have one in deck, because this is the main playmaker of the deck. Adgarda isn't as good because first of all it's a rock monster, second of all I like the negation over the banishment, but banishing is sometimes helpful, plus as well I think it goes against back row because it targets 1 card on the field, so it can be neat to get rid of certain annoying cards that your opponent has. Yeah, it's you want to see which feels better for you. I felt like these ratios are fine, but you could get away with just running 2 of them because you can cycle them back into your deck, and usually after you've summoned 2 Generator, you will either have won or have lost the duel anyway, so it doesn't really matter if you get a 3rd one out. Plus, technically Har could still use its effect even if you don't get the tokens, because you have to tribute spellcasters, which most of the monsters in this deck are, but some of the extra deck monsters are not, so you have to be aware of that one. Triple Spell Power Mastery, it's just in here to search Endymion, and Endymion is such a good card, especially in this variant, so I would play it at 3. You could bump it down to 2 if you like, but sometimes you might end up with bricks in your hand that do nothing. Magistus Invocation, also because I do like the fact that you can fusion summon a lot, and I sometimes want to search a different card with Vare, so I like Magistus Invocation at 3. Plus, if you don't really have much of a play starter, or you just draw Crowley plus Har, for example, then you could still go into your fusion monster, and yeah, I feel like that's nice. You could put it down to 1 or 2 if you like. I felt like at 3 it was actually quite neat. Same with the Revive spell. Because you have a searchable discard, the Revive spell is actually quite nice. I decided to run it at 3. That's just a way to get your Endymion easily back as well, because the Fire Magistus actually summons it back, but it negates its effects, so this isn't as helpful as this card would be. Could run Monster Reborn as well on one of them and just see where it goes, but I kind of liked these ratios. Obviously, you play a boss stage at 3. Technically, you want to be playing at 4. If you have Terraforming, then definitely run Terraforming over a boss fight, because we don't want to give our opponent an extra draw. Just terrible, but it's a way to get into your boss stage, and sometimes the extra draw then doesn't matter too much, but I don't like it. So if you have Terraforming, definitely run Terraforming over a boss fight. Magistus, a card that a lot of people run at 3. I felt it felt better at 2, but you can play around with the ratios as much as you like. I hated seeing 2 of them in my starting hand, and I sometimes even hated seeing 1 of them in my starting hand, because you have already so many ways of getting your cards out, and a lot of the time special summoning 1 more card from your hand rather than saving it for the next turn isn't achieving that much more for you, because you still only have like 1 disruption, because the deck just doesn't have that much. It's better in a variant that runs stuff like Bahamut Shark plus a Totally Awesome, because you then could go into your fusion monster plus Totally Awesome. So this could be something to consider. But other than that, it didn't give me that much more, and it felt more like a win more cards, especially because you don't even run that many level 4 spellcasters. It's a hard one. I didn't like it at 3, but do with it as you please. Forbidden Chalice, good going first, good going second, great disruption. Can give your generators a necessary attack point boost if you have to beat over a Blue Eyes White Dragon, for example. Not too bad as well. Double or Nothing, great card in the deck. Magistus 3G, actually good to start some plays if you draw Riliona plus 1 other spellcaster, like for example Har. Then you can search this with it, equip your Artemis, and then from there onwards search Crowley and go maybe into like your OTK plays with Utopia Double if you go in second. This card is helpful to break like the Buster Log, for example. It's in general quite good to force out stuff from your opponent if you go a second, because you could equip your Riliona, the Xyz monster, or the Wardrobe, because this can actually negate one of your opponent's monster's effects. So this card is quite neat actually going second, and can force a negate out of your opponent in theory, and I quite liked it for this, so I definitely run it at 1, but everything more than 1 feels weird. Technically the second effect is quite nice, especially with stuff like Shadows, or if you want to run Untis and whatnot. There's certain cards you could be playing to utilize the second effect more, but it's never come up for me. Usually games are over before this is relevant in any shape or form, but can be quite cheesy sometimes. I run Double Lost Wind. It's a cheap trap card, and it is good in the grind game because it keeps setting itself back. Helps against certain things like DPE, I felt, so this is definitely a card that I decided running, and it has done some good things for me in the duels that I played, so I felt like this is the right choice for me. But obviously if you have good hand traps like Impermanence and whatnots, probably better to run those. Generaider boss fight, inferior card to Terraforming in my opinion, but you could run it if you don't have Terraforming. Solemn Judgment, a card that most people will have for free as well, and is very good going first, so I definitely run 1 of them at least. For the monsters in the extra deck, triple the fusion, which is funny enough not a spellcaster, so be aware of this one. It's one of your bigger playmakers. The annoying part is if your opponent has spell trap removal after you steal their monster, then it just goes back to them, it doesn't get destroyed, which is a bit annoying, but you have to deal with that. You don't get much more in this deck so far. I think there's a synchro monster that will be coming out at one point. For now we have to play stuff like Enlightenment Paladin, because that is the budget version, and its effect isn't completely useless. You burn your opponent when you destroy an opponent's monster by battle, can finish off a game, and if you already ran out of your Magistus monster, then it's not terrible, but any other level 8 is basically better. If you have any one of the expensive ones, then run that instead. Utopia and Utopia Double are good for OTKing your opponent after maybe stalling them out a bit, especially with Lost Wind. Halving your opponent's monsters' attack points can lead to you finishing them quite easily. Nina Ruru is very good spell trap removal, helps very much, plus technically the crit monster can make up to 2 attacks on monsters during each battle phase, which can be quite nice from time to time. And the effect adding cards back to your hand isn't terrible. It's not great, and I wouldn't use it that much, but sometimes it comes in handy, so who knows. Riliona, the Wardrobe, is a very, 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 very good card. Problem is a bit that you lock yourself into Magistus monsters, which is annoying, but you can just use it at the end of the turn. Doesn't conflict at all with Generaider, so this is also a reason why Generators work quite well in this specific deck. You would be wanting to run this card at least at 2. 1 is fine, it doesn't hinder you too much, but being able to go into it again or equip 1 from your extra deck and still summon 1 is better. So if you have 2 of this card, definitely run 2. Artemis is actually fine at 1. One of your main cards. Technically, it's not bad having 2, because if your opponent banishes it out of the graveyard for some reason or gets rid of it so you can't use it again from the graveyard, then you're kind of screwed. This card searches so much, deck thins so much, is really good. And for the rest, just like a generic link 3, which you could go into if you use Artemis, but at this point you can just play any kind of cards that you like. Stuff comes to mind like a level 9, possibly. If you have 3 level 9s, you could go into with your 3 Generators, which will never happen. Could run rank 8 stuff like Yugioh, which could go into this card then, could go into Numeron Dragon, whatnots, because your fusion monster and your synchro monster are level 8. So this is a thing after a turn, if they're both still alive, you could then go into some rank 8 plays, but a lot of the time it's not really necessary. But since you don't really lack space in your extra deck, it's fine. I ran 1 Rugal. Yeah, I tried it out with Dogmatica before and it was quite funny, but technically for 3rd G second effect, if that comes up, it's a cheap card and it can reduce your opponent's monster by 300 attack for each monster type you control, which will be 1 or 2, so maximum of 600 points. Terrible. Still, I didn't know what else to put in this extra deck. Baguska is fine, Exeter Knight is fine. There's so many cards, but they're all not budget, and this card was cheap, so what does it matter? And Raster Liger card you get from one of the structure decks or starter decks, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, link 4 if you need it, but you won't need it at all. Another card to mention is Wonder Wand. It's neat because you can actually attribute a card, or it works at least to be popped by Endymion, so can help you draw. Sometimes you will have like one spellcaster monster on board that you don't necessarily need anymore, so technically you could use it. It's in this specific deck possibly a tiny bit better than Spellbook of Knowledge, but not overly. Drawing cards is always good, but you don't have to run it at all. You could run Planet Pathfinder to go into your Generator boss stage, but since this card is not a spellcaster, who would have thought, it's a machine. It only works well if you draw Magistus, Planet Pathfinder, and one of your Magistus monsters. Then it doesn't matter too much that you need your normal summon for this card, but other than that, it is kind of annoying. It is another way for you to at least get started somewhat, but if you didn't get ashed and you don't have anything else in hand, it's quite terrible actually. So I would not play this card, but you could if you'd like to. Hope you enjoyed the deck profile. That's it. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, blah blah blah, but most importantly, hope you have a good day.